Okay.
You ever drawn that?
Everybody smiled and impressed. All right, they're able to step.
Anytime they want. Did you get something they can do with it? They can do it anytime they want. How heavy is that? How heavy is that?
He's almost a minute late. You better give him a Hail Mary or
First trying to touch a mace. That's all it.
Bring out the chocolate.
House will come to order. Members, please take your seats. Sergeant at Arms.
The House is now in session. All persons not entitled to privileges on the floor, please retire to the gallery.
The members will rise and be led in prayer by the Reverend Carolyn Landis Bing, pastor of Counseling Ministries, Harrisonburg First Church of the Nazarene, and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, led by the gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Let us pray together, please. Dear Creator, we humbly acknowledge your love, grace, and mercy. We are grateful to be able to serve you and others. Please give us your mind and your heart. We are reminded that we are defined by being yours, not by what we do. And we ask for your guidance and wisdom as we serve our community and the people of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Clergy statewide has been praying for you during this session and for your families. Lord, we will continue to lift them up. We acknowledge your plan and purpose for our lives. We receive your love, which is unconditional, unfailing, and everlasting. In your precious and holy name, we pray. Amen.
Amen. The members will answer the roll call by indicating their presence on the electronic voting board. Clerk will close the roll.
Mr. Speaker, a quorum is present.
Pursuant to House Rule 3, I've examined and approved the Journal of the House of Delegates for March 8, 2016. Motions and resolutions under Rule 39 are now in order. Does the clerk have any announcements or communications?
Several communications, Mr. Speaker. The Senate has rejected the House amendments to Senate Bills 39, Senate Bill 237, Senate Bill 692, and Senate Bill 748.
Gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House insist on its amendments and request the Committee of Conference on the previously reported legislation.
Those in favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is agreed to.
In addition, the Senate has insisted on its amendments and requested a Committee of Conference on the following House bills: House Bill 25, House Bill 168, House Bill 373, House Bill 568, House Bill 622, House Bill 842, House Bill 858, House Bill 879, House Bill 1228, and House Bill 1255.
Gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House accede to the request of the Senate for a committee of conference on the previously reported legislation.
Those in favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is agreed to.
In addition, the Speaker appoints on behalf of the House the committees of conference for 4 or 5 bills here. First up, House Bill 895, and part of the House, the Speaker appoints Delegates Greason, Lemunyon, and Bulova. For House Bill 895, Speaker appoints Delegates Greason, Lemunyon, and Bulova. For Senate Bill 329, the Speaker appoints on behalf of the House as conferees Delegates Pillion, Kilgore, and Mason. For Senate Bill 329, Delegates Pillion, Kilgore, and Mason. For Senate Joint Resolution 58, the Speaker appoints part of the House Delegates Stolley, Cox, and Toscano. For Senate Joint Resolution 58, Delegates Stolley, Cox, and Toscano. For Senate Joint Resolution 85, the Speaker appoints on behalf of the House conferees Delegates Landis, Cox, and Toscano. For Senate Joint Resolution 85, Delegates Landis, Cox, and Toscano. And finally, the Speaker appoints on behalf of the House for Senate Joint Resolution 97, Delegates Yancey, Cox, and Plum. SJR 97, House conferees Delegates Yancey, Cox, and Plum. Mr. Speaker, that's all the announcements and communications I have at this time.
The gentleman from Loudoun, Mr. Bell.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for appointed personal privilege.
The gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, as we celebrate Women's History Month, I wanted to take a moment to recognize the contributions that women have made to our military. Today, over 200,000 women currently serve on active duty in our military. Today, I want to single out and honor a particular individual, retired General Ann Dunwoody, who was the first woman in U.S. military history to achieve the rank of 4-star general. General Dunwoody was born here in Virginia at Fort Belvoir to a military family. Her family's history of military service goes back 5 generations, with relatives who served our country in Cuba, as well as World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. While she was born here in Virginia, she frequently moved with her family, spent much of her time growing up in Germany and Belgium. While she was in college, she attended an Army introduction program that led her to taking the Women's Army Officer Orientation course. Upon graduation from college, she was directly commissioned into the Women's Army Corps. She served admirably as a division parachute officer deployed during Operation Desert Storm, as well as the 1st Corps Support Command Commander during Operation Enduring Freedom. In addition, as the commander of Surface Deployment and Distribution Command, she supported the largest deployment and redeployment of U.S. forces since World War II. She also played a very active role in working to decrease sexual assault within the Army, believing that it should be the aim of the Army to be the example for the world in this regard. In 2004, she returned to Virginia, where she became the first woman to command the Combined Arms Support Command at Fort Lee. In June of 2008, she was nominated as Commanding General of U.S. Army Materiel Command by President George W. Bush. A few months later, on November 14, 2008, she received her 4th star. She then served until her retirement in 2012. Mr. Speaker, I ask that this month, as we recognize the accomplishments of women in our nation's history, that we remember the service of women who protect our nation today, and we also today honor the service and the path that General Dunwoody has led for all women in our armed forces. Thank you.
The gentlewoman from Westmoreland, Ms. Ranson.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a request.
Gentlewoman has the floor.
I'd like to request the journal reflect my seatmate from Halifax is away due to pressing personal business.
Journal will so reflect. The gentlewoman from Chesterfield, Ms. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for an introduction.
Gentlewoman has the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House, in the gallery today, and I'd like for them to all stand, visiting the Capitol, we have Mrs. Elizabeth Dyson's fourth grade class from Banner Christian School in North Chesterfield. Banner Christian School is a K-12 program that is dedicated to developing and educating the whole person and considers paramount every child's academic, emotional, physical, social, and spiritual needs. Along with the Capitol, the class will also be going to visit St. John's Church. I ask the body to give a warm welcome to the fourth graders from Banner Christian School.
We are really delighted to see the fourth graders here today, and we hope you really enjoy your time in the Capitol and at St. John's Church as well. The gentleman from Augusta, Mr. Landis.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for the purpose of an introduction.
Gentleman may proceed.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, this morning we have with us two special guests from the area that I represent, and I'm going to ask them to stand and be recognized. First of all, I'd like to introduce Reverend Carolyn Landis Bing, who is the pastor of Counseling Ministries that offered our prayer this morning for the Harrisonburg First Church of the Nazarene. That is a very large church with a large denomination and have exceptional ministries. And also with her is Betty Landis, who, Mr. Speaker, I know under the rules this is not appropriate, but I'm going to do it anyway, who is joined Reverend Bing, who is my mom, and Reverend Bing happens to be my sister. So I hope you will welcome them to the house this morning.
We're delighted to have the Landis family with us this morning. We thank you very much for taking the time. We're very proud. I know you're very proud of your brother's son. Thank you. The gentleman from Montgomery, Mr. Rush.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a motion.
Gentleman may state it.
Mr. Speaker, could House Joint Resolution 446 on page 10 be passed by indefinitely?
Without objection, House Joint Resolution 446 by until July 4th. The gentleman from Hanover, Mr. Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for the purpose of an introduction.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen in the House, today joining us in the gallery is Miss Melissa Miller from the Hanover Chamber of Commerce. Please stand. Hope you'll join me in giving Miss Miller a warm house welcome.
The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Sickles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for an announcement.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tonight at the library at 6:30 to 8, we'll be joined by our Turkish American friends, Virginians, who will bring some of that fantastic Turkish food, kebabs, and I hope you'll come by and talk to them. Again, it's the library at 6:30 tonight. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Suffolk, Mr. Jones.
Speaker, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Gentleman may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. Last night around 9 o'clock, the House and Senate conferees finished their work on House Bills 29 and 30. And I am, thank you. The report should be available online, hopefully by between 4 and 6 o'clock this evening, and then the 48-hour procedural clock will then begin. For the second year in a row, we will be voting on the budget prior to Saturday, and I'm very proud of that accomplishment and been proud to be a part of the team. I appreciate the hard work of all the conferees. I'll get to that in a minute. This is a conservative, responsible, and structurally balanced budget. It does not include any fee or tax increases. It restores the rainy day fund to 90% of its balance prior to 2014 shortfall. It fully funds the VRS rate, the board certified rates for state employees in the first year, and it does so for the teachers in the second year. We have taken the $193 million deferral that existed from 3 or 4 years ago. We have paid that off. That saves us $88 million in all funds, about half general fund and half non-general fund. There will be a separate bond bill, House Bill 1344, we will finish today, and we will allocate any excess revenues that we have when the end of the year occurs to buying down any debt that might occur from this bond package. On K-12, we actually have $73 million more than what was introduced in the governor's budget. I think that deserves a round of applause for the conferees. Delegates Greason and Cox did an outstanding job in conference. It provides for a 2% teacher pay raise in the first year. It reestablishes the lottery policy, and the second year we will have $147 million in the K-12 budget. That is 29% of the lottery. We used to have a policy of 40% going back to our jurisdictions. This will get us 3/4 of the way there. I'm very proud of their work. We also have, for those in Northern Virginia, $36 million in cost to compete, and we have $35 million for additional at-risk and divisions across the Commonwealth with high, free, and reduced lunch populations. On higher education, we include $114 million for operational and maintenance at our colleges and universities to hold down tuition increases for Virginia families. And this budget that you will be voting on, conference report on Friday, has 78.6, I'll repeat that, 78.6 million more dollars than was introduced in the governor's budget. On economic development, we had a priority of trying to make sure where we spend our money, we know what's going on. Our position prevailed with the dollars for the 2 positions in JLARC to do an annual review ongoing. We funded the Go Virginia research initiatives. We added, I think we split the difference, Delegate Cox, and went to $35 million on that. We added $12.5 million for the credentialing workforce, Kathy Byron's bill, Delegate Byron's bill, and we have $1.5 million for broadband in underserved areas of our Commonwealth. We invest in the healthcare safety net. We have 355 new waiver slots on top of the DOJ mandate. This will get 200 people off of the urgent waiting list. We stopped the closure of the Catawba Hospital, and we invest in our state employees. We have a 3% raise for our state employees in year 1, which I think is significant. We have a 2% pay raise for our state-supported local employees, plus career development, and we fully funded the compression for the sheriffs. We did $65 and $85, $85 for the sworn, $65 for the non-sworn for their years of service, years over 5 and up to capped at 30. For our state police, they will get a 3% raise as well. And if you recall last year, we actually started a 2-year process to fix compression. We will fully fund that second year. And Senator Carrico had legislation, in the budget, he had 10 new members of a newly established tactical division. I think it's called Special Operations Division. That sounds, I guess, more official. He had 10 in the first year and had 10 in the second year. We've actually moved those positions to the first year, so we'll be funding 20 positions. And really in Southwest Virginia, I think it's Region 3. I think Region 3. So that I think is very significant. It's as I said, a conservative budget, and I'm very proud of the work that has been done. Structurally balanced. And at the start of the session, a speaker said that the most important thing was how we craft our budget. And I think that we as a House have done a wonderful job working with our colleagues down the end of the hall. And if I could, Todd, y'all are killing me. I know y'all are talking. To get back where I was, excuse me.
The House will come to order.
It is a bipartisan, bicameral document that will be on your desk on Friday. And the reason I want everyone to listen to this part is we got here because of the approach that we have taken the last couple of years and the Senate has taken the last couple of years. The governor gets credit, the Senate gets credit, and we get credit. We have to work together as a team, and that's what we have done. It's a stark contrast to what happens in Washington, and I'm very proud of the Senate staff. Betsy and her staff have done a very good job working with Robert Vaughn and our staff. They started many, many, many months ago working on issues together, and what you see or will see tonight online and Friday is a product of that effort. I look forward to voting on Friday. Before I close, I want to, Robert and his staff, I'm not sure what happened with the Senate staff last night, but I assume they were here as late. Dottie, who does our proofing, she left this morning at 8:15. And I saw her here yesterday morning at 9 o'clock. I know 2 of our staffs went home between 3 and 4, and they were back here at 9 o'clock. That tells you the dedication, because you have to balance, you have to proof, and make sure everything is correct when we get it. And lastly, I want to thank Steve, Delegate Landis, Delegate Cox, Delegate Greason, Delegate O'Bannon, and Delegate Torian. Those 5 individuals did the bulk of the work. They worked very late. HHR is worth probably about 3 subcommittees, and I'm very proud of the fact that they were able to work with their colleagues upstairs in a very collegial way to get a budget done on time, and we will be voting prior to Friday. So I want to thank you again for all that y'all have done in helping us fashion and shape this budget, and I look forward to the discussion on Friday. And Mr. Speaker, thank you for your time.
Thank you. The gentlewoman from Newport News, Ms. Price.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for an introduction.
Gentlewoman has the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, today we have with us students from Mr. Terry Jones's Life Skills Empowerment class at Woodside High School, located in Newport News. I ask that they stand. This class is a perfect example of a partnership between the Newport News public school system and local nonprofits, as Brothers on the Block work with them weekly. These students are awesome, and they're interested in more educational opportunities and economic development so they can continue to work hard towards a successful future. Students, we encourage you to stay engaged, and we wish you well on the rest of your school year. Thank you.
We're pleased to have the students from Newport News with us today and hope you enjoy your visit to the Capitol. The gentleman from Shenandoah, Mr. Gilbert.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a motion.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the following bills go by for the day. On page 1 of the printed calendar, Senate Bill 9. On page 2, Senate Bill 669. On page 3, Senate Bill 758. On page 18, House Bill 605. And on page 18, House Bill 766.
Without objection, those bills will go by for the day. The gentleman from Virginia Beach, Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for introduction.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the galley today, or possibly over in the Senate right now, Law Enforcement United is here with us today. It's a 100% volunteer organization that honors the service and sacrifices of officers who have given their lives in the line of duty, along with providing support to surviving family members. They have a Road to Hope 250-mile bike ride from Chesapeake to Washington, D.C. that promotes awareness of fallen officers and raises donations to support their charities. It requires a great deal of time and commitment, not just from the members, but from their various departments. Law Enforcement United is non-political and reaches out to both sides of the political aisle. There are 3 sheriffs in Virginia who not only personally support Law Enforcement United, but go above and beyond. Virginia Beach Sheriff Ken Stolley, Fairfax Sheriff Stacy Kincaid, and Chesapeake Sheriff John O'Sullivan, as well as Virginia State Superintendent Colonel Steve Flaherty. Their support gives us tools and personnel and logistical support that they need to accomplish their mission. I would move that the House give the members of Law Enforcement United a warm welcome. Mr. Speaker.
We're pleased to have the officers with us. We thank you for all that you do and applaud you for your efforts. Thank you for being here today. The gentleman from Virginia Beach, Mr. Villanueva.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for an introduction.
The gentleman has the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House, in my parents' native language, Magandang Umaga. Translation in Virginia, howdy y'all. All right? In the gallery, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, we have with us 3 beautiful princesses representing Miss Philippines Preteen Virginia. We have Mia Alana Kalim, Miss Preteens Virginia. Mia is an advocate for chronic illnesses for children. She's 7 years old, and she wants to be the President of the United States. All right? We have Miss Corel Fuentes, Miss Visaya. She's a 9-year-old third grader, and she enjoys reading books, and her dream is to become either a teacher or a nurse. All right? And then we have give her a round of applause. We have Miss Angelina Myers, Miss Preen Mindanao, who is also 9 years old and attends public schools. She's a performer and currently is a cheerleader at her school's basketball team. On behalf of the Beach Boys from the Virginia Beach, we give them a warm round of applause, and I would ask my fellow colleagues to give them a warm round of applause. Thank you.
We're delighted to have the, future president with us and other very important people. Thank you very much for taking the time to come and visit with us today. The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to move the House stand in recess until 10:50.
The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox, moves the House stand in recess until 10:50. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is agreed to.
The House Republican Caucus will meet immediately upon a recess in House Room 1. The Democratic Caucus will meet immediately upon recess in House Room 2.
The House stands in recess until 10:50. House will come to order. The clerk will continue the calendar.
Continuing with today's calendar, page 8 of the printed version, next category, memorial resolutions laid on the Speaker's table. The memorial resolutions to be adopted in block are listed on pages 8 through 10 of the printed calendar.
Does any member desire to remove a resolution from the block? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting en bloc the memorial resolutions laid on the Speaker's table as listed on pages 8 through 10 of the calendar shall please rise. Resolutions are agreed to.
Continuing with the calendar, next category, commending resolutions laid on the Speaker's table.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Prince William, Mr. Marshall.
Having voted on the prevailing side by which we refuse to engross Senate Bill 767, I move we reconsider that vote.
What page?
Page 3.
It's on one of the pages, Mr. Speaker.
Three.
The gentleman from Prince William, Mr. Marshall, moves that having voted on the prevailing side by which we agreed to Senate Bill 767, we reconsider that vote. Is there any favor of that
Mr.
motion?
Speaker, we did not agree, Mr. Speaker.
Speaking to the motion.
I beg your pardon?
We did not agree. We refused to engross it.
Pass.
Right, passed. Okay, right.
The gentleman from Hopewell, Mr. Ingram.
Mr. Speaker, the motion was to reconsider the vote.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I would object to reconsidering the vote. I think that I would encourage the people of the body to please vote no.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Spotsylvania, Mr. Cole.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the motion.
Gentleman has the floor.
I would ask that we allow the common courtesy to reconsider the vote. This is a courtesy that we provide to most members, and I would hope that we would vote in favor of the gentleman's motion.
The gentleman, Prince William, Mr. Marshall moves that having voted on the prevailing side by which we passed Senate Bill 767, we reconsider that vote. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Chair's in doubt. As many as favor the motion will please raise their right hand. They're enough up. That's okay.
Mr. Speaker.
The motion's agreed to. Gentleman from Shenandoah, Mr. Gilbert.
Can that bill go by for the day?
Without objection, Senate Bill 767 by for the day.
Returning to page 10 of today's printed calendar, next category bills, commending resolutions laid on the Speaker's table.
The gentleman Smith, Mr. Campbell.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a request.
Gentleman may state it.
May House Joint Resolution 492 on page 12 be removed from the block and go by for the day.
Without objection, House Joint Resolution 492 by for the day.
Mr. Speaker, the commending resolutions laid on the Speaker's table to be adopted in block are listed on pages 10 through 17, with the exception of House Joint Resolution 492, and 446 already has been removed as well. PBI.
Are there other resolutions that a member wishes to have removed? Gentleman Fairfax, Mr. Sickles.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
May state it.
Is House Resolution 206 in this block?
Yes.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman Fairfax.
It's in the block?
Take it out.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think the members on this side, who patroned it are not showing up on the system, so I wondered if we could just go by for the day on your resolution so we can get people to sign up. And if I could say now, if you haven't signed on to HR 206, I've got a sign-up sheet at my desk here, especially for folks on this side. Thank you very much.
So the commending resolution adopted en bloc are listed on pages 10 through 17 with the exception of 446, 492, and 206.
All those in favor of adopting the commending resolutions laid on the Speaker's table on pages 10 through 17 of the calendar, with the exception of the ones the clerk just mentioned, will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The resolutions are agreed to.
Continuing with today's calendar, page 17 of the printed version, page 17, a House bill vetoed by the governor. House Bill 1188 is an act to amend the Code of Virginia relating to technical adjustments of certain Senate district boundaries. Bill passed the House February 10th. The governor's veto is available online and before the body.
The gentleman from Henrico, Mr. Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, speaking to the governor's veto.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to ask the body to override the veto. In saying that, I actually think I put this in for very non-political reasons. For a long time, this body has honored technical adjustments, whether it was from a Democratic district, a Republican district, a Senate district, or a House district. The other body across the hall got a little crazy with this stuff. I don't deny that a couple years ago. We didn't. We never have. In fact, in 2013, all of you who are here voted for one with technical adjustments. What I would say is this does not in any way, shape, or form change the partisan makeup of these districts. It would have absolutely no impact whatsoever on the results or the demographic makeup of them. I've heard a number of arguments. One, I've heard some, quite frankly, weird partisan arguments on this side. And then I heard some talking points, somebody mumble through some talking points. I'm sure somebody in the governor's office has sent them. I I think what we have done here is we have, by not honoring these, made them so much more partisan and ridiculous than they ever needed to be. And quite frankly, it didn't start in this body, it started in the other one. And I don't deny that at all. And quite frankly, I hope we go back to it, because we've all voted for them before, we've all honored them before, and I would honor anyone else's, no matter what side of the aisle are on their technical adjustments. And the excuse of, well, if we do technical, then why shouldn't we just do them whenever we want? Well, because quite frankly, it's very easy to tell the difference between a technical amendment and a partisan one. And it's not that hard to distinguish between the two. So I hope everyone in the body will go back to the tradition that we've long held to honor registrar's requests in a nonpartisan way. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I would move that we override the governor's veto.
Gentleman from Rockbridge, Mr. Klein.
Mr. Speaker, I was wondering if the gentleman could tell us how he really felt about this.
Gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Sickles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try not to mumble this time, be more clear. I'm speaking to the veto, with your permission.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A message from the governor. The governor's message, and you have it there, is that this bill is unconstitutional and the bill sets bad precedent and policy. Article 2, Section 6 of the Constitution says that the General Assembly shall reapportion the Commonwealth into electoral districts in accordance with this section in the year 2011 and every 10 years thereafter. This sets up a decennial redistricting law, which is the exclusive time to redraw electoral districts. There is no language in the Constitution that says technical adjustments are permitted. So while the Supreme Court has not addressed this issue, I've mentioned before that a Richmond Circuit Court, where a lot of these decisions are argued, found in Little v. Virginia State Board of Elections that the Virginia Constitution limited the General Assembly's authority to reapportion Virginia's electoral districts after the year 2011. Moreover, if it were constitutional, it's a bad precedent. The redistricting process is already hypercharged with partisanship. Having the opportunity to change district each year just injects more partisanship into the legislative districts. If it is okay to make minor changes outside of the census year, then it's okay to make major changes to districts. This would allow even more abuse of gerrymandering than we already have, so I ask the body to sustain the governor's veto. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman, Prince William, Mr. Marshall.
Speaking to the measure.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the Constitution, Article 2, Section 6, Paragraph 2, it talks about when we must do redistricting. If this document is solely a limitation on the powers of the agents of the people, there is nothing in here limiting the power as when we may do something. And in fact, my memory on this is that reading a case out of Texas in which federal courts decided that a redistricting was permitted, it wasn't required, they reached a conclusion, and it was far higher than a circuit court, state circuit court, that it could be done, but it didn't have to be done. And if there are courts who would order us to do something, then the argument would be, well, we can't possibly reapportion because the Constitution only allows us to do it right after the decennial census. So I would suggest that it may be done, but it's not mandated to be done. Thank you.
Anybody not made up their mind yet? The gentleman from Powhatan, Mr. Ware.
Mr. Speaker, I move the pending question.
The gentleman from Powhatan, Mr. Ware, moves the pending question. Many in favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is agreed to. Shall the House override the governor's veto? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 65, noes 34.
Ayes 65, noes 34. The override is not successful.
Continuing with the calendar, page 18 of the printed version, House Bill 562. House Bill 562 is an act to amend and reenact various sections of the Code of Virginia relating to licensure of massage therapists. The bill originally passed the House, legislation passed the House January 29th. The governor's recommendation has been distributed and is before the body.
The gentlewoman from Chesterfield, Ms. Robinson.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 562, the governor just changed the word to or, and I think it's fine, so I hope we can accept that recommendation.
Shall the governor's recommendation be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 97, noes 1.
Ayes 97, noes 1. The governor's recommendation is
Continuing with House bills as recommendations by the governor, House Bill 605 is taken by for the day. House Bill 766 likewise by for the day.
The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Speaker, I move the House stand in recess until 1 o'clock.
The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox, moves the House stand in recess until 1 o'clock. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is agreed to. The House stands in recess until 1 p.m. The House will come to order. Members, please take your seats. Members, please take your seats. Shall the bill pass? Does the clerk have any announcements?
Yes, sir, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to correct the record. I made a mistake on reading the list. For the House conferees on Senate Bill 468, the previous announced conferees were Ingram, Spruill, and Ingram, Hugo, and Spruill. The correct ones, and I apologize, for Senate Bill 468, conferees, part of the House, delegates Ingram, Hugo, and Hester. My apologies.
Let me just kind of tell you where I think we are at this point. I'd remind the House that our status with House Joint Resolution 424, the joint order resolution that we had yesterday, is as follows. The clerk announced the House members of the Joint Committee, and they had attempted to meet with their counterparts from the Senate to count the vote of each House and report back the results. However, the committee was unable to meet due to the Senate voting to suspend the joint order and subsequently adjourning. Pursuant to House Joint Resolution 424, the joint order may be suspended for no more than 24 hours to receive a report of the committee. However, If a report is not received in the time allowed, then the joint order will become void. Further, House Joint Resolution 37, the procedural resolution, directs the House and the Senate to proceed in a special and continuing order today for the election of certain judgeships. Therefore, upon the conclusion of the morning hour, unless the House votes to suspend or postpone or discharge the special and continuing order by a majority vote pursuant to House Joint Resolution 37 and House Rule 52, then the special order shall take precedence over all other business of the House. As a reminder, the setting of a special order does require a 2/3 vote of the House, and in this case, that's already been done by the adoption of House Joint Resolution 37. The joint order resolution, yet to be considered, sets the slate of judicial offices to be elected by the House and the Senate and requires a majority vote for adoption pursuant to House Rule 52. Finally, at the appropriate time, each body will adopt and communicate their respective nominating resolutions and subsequently vote to elect individuals nominated for each listed judgeship. The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the special and continuing order pursuant to Rule 19 of HJR 37 be suspended until the conclusion of today's calendar. If I could speak to that motion.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, all this does is this is going to move the special continuing order, and I think the Speaker was clear that's a majority vote, to the end of the calendar. That resolution is just not ready yet. And so that allows us to do the calendar and then go to the special order resolution for the normal, the one that was in the procedural resolution for the normal election of judges.
Thank you. The gentleman from Charlottesville, Mr. Toscano, speaking to the motion.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I think I heard that you said that the other order would expire 24 hours from yesterday. And my question has to do with the report of the people who were going to count the votes from yesterday. Are they not under an obligation to move forward with that since the Senate is in session at present?
No, I don't think that's necessary at this point. Yeah, the Senate suspended their procedure, so they're not in a position to receive the report.
Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry.
Let me state it.
I thought yesterday the argument was that since the Senate had adjourned, am I hearing you state that they have actually suspended their order and will require a new order?
No, they postponed it. Under the resolution, they can postpone it for up to 24 hours.
Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry.
Let me state it.
Since I don't read the Senate journals on a regular basis, I'm assuming that was published in that would be published in the journal yesterday afternoon before they adjourned. That be right?
Me either, but I'll bet you it was.
Right.
And they sent us a message to that effect as well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking of the resolution,
gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I don't want to belabor the point, and I think what I'll do is I'll put my concerns in writing and send it to the chair and have it included in the record. But again, I would renew my objection under the rules of the House that this would require 2/3. But I don't want to belabor it. You've already ruled. Thank you.
Thank you. The questions on the motion from the gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion's agreed to. Clerk will call the calendar.
Calendar for the Virginia House of Delegates for today, Wednesday, March 9th, 2016. Page 1 of the printed calendar, first category, Senate bills on third reading uncontested calendar. Senate Bill 9 has been taken by for the day. Continuing with the calendar on page 2, Senate bills on third reading regular calendar. That category of bills begins with Senate Bill 669, which has been taken by for the day accordingly. First up for today's action, Senate Bill 578, a bill to amend and reenact a section of the code relating to alcoholic beverage control, limited brewery license, for the Committee on General Laws with a substitute. And Mr. Speaker, there also is a floor amendment.
The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Hugo.
Mr. Speaker, speak to the floor amendment.
Clerk will report a floor amendment.
Floor amendment offered by Delegate Hugo to the committee sub that has not been yet adopted. Line 117. On line 117, strike all of lines 117 through line 135.
Gentlemen wish to adopt the committee substitute first, to which this amendment is drawn.
Yes, sir. Adopt the substitute.
Questions on adoption of the committee substitute? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Committee substitutes agree to. The gentleman from Fairfax.
And Mr. Speaker, to explain the floor amendment, I spoke with the patron of the bill, the senator. This is an amendment simply to try to put the bill into conference to work on it. He's agreed on it. I spoke with the minority leader and the chairman of the committee. So I would urge the adoption of the amendment, and then we'll work with the patron in conference.
The questions on adoption of the floor amendment offered by the gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Hugo. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The floor amendments agreed to. The gentleman from Fairfax.
Mr. Speaker, with that, I'd urge the adoption of the bill.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 93, noes 4.
Ayes 93, noes 4. The bill is passed.
Senate Bill 579, a bill to amend and reenact a section of the Code of Virginia relating to alcoholic beverage control, limited distillers licenses. Report to the Committee on General Laws with a substitute. Mr. Speaker, there also are floor amendments drawn to the committee substitute.
The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Hugo.
Mr. Speaker, first I'd move the adoption of the substitute committee
Questions
substitute.
on adoption of the committee substitute. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The substitute's agreed to. Clerk will report a floor amendment.
Floor amendment offered by Delegate Hugo to the just adopted committee substitute. Amendment number 1 on line 114. Line 114, strike all of lines 114 through 132.
Gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Hugo.
Mr. Speaker, again, this amendment is designed simply to put the bill into conference. I've spoken to the patron of the bill. He's agreed to it. Spoken with the minority leader and with the committee chairman. I'd urge the adoption of the amendment.
Questions on adoption of the floor amendment offered by the gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Hugo. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Floor amendment's agreed to. Gentleman from Fairfax.
Mr. Speaker, I'd urge the adoption of the passage of the bill.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 94, noes 3.
Ayes 94, noes 3. The bill is passed.
Continuing with the calendar, page 3, the printed version, Senate Bill 758 has been taken by for the day. Next up, Senate Bill 41, a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to religious freedom, solemnization of marriage. The bill is reported to the Committee on General Laws with a substitute.
Gentleman from Shenandoah, Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee substitute.
Questions on adoption of the committee substitute. As many as favor that motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Substitute agreed to. Gentleman from Shenandoah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, for all of those of you who remember my House Bill 773, which caused some lengthy debate on the floor, this bill is much more narrowly tailored as it exists now in the House substitute. The bill simply prevents any religious institution, organization which they supervise, or any individual they employ, any member of the clergy, basically any charitable institutions, any schools, any clergy members, all of whom have to be based around a religious belief, does not require them to participate in any marriage, and further does not allow them to be subjected to any penalty, as penalty is defined in the bill. for their belief that marriage is between the union of one man and one woman, and that is what the bill does, Mr. Speaker, and I would move that the bill pass.
Gentlewoman from Fairfax, Ms. Watts.
Will the gentleman yield for a question?
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you. I would ask the gentleman, when I look at the penalties, I'm seeing scholarships, employment, license, accreditation, and also since it covers anything supervised or controlled, or any staff operating in such any institution. Does this bill then also include any religiously affiliated institution of higher learning or any other private school?
Mr. Speaker, I would say to the gentlewoman that I believe that it would include religious institutions, be they K through 12, private schools, or religious schools of higher learning.
Further question, Mr. Speaker.
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
I would ask the gentleman then, do I read the bill correctly that in any of those settings, an expression of opposition to marriage being between anybody other than one man and one woman can be expressed in any form at any time? End of question.
Mr. Speaker, I'd answer the gentlewoman that this doesn't have to do with expression as much as it does with the ability of the state to penalize an institution or individuals working in that institution for having those beliefs.
Final question.
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
So if I interpret these answers correctly, would then an educational institution who has as part of its admissions policy that conformance to this belief is what the moral convictions, religious convictions of this institution are, and you must conform to that policy, and they would use that as a basis of non-admission to the policy, is the result of this bill then saying that this could not affect in any way grants to that institution by the state or scholarships or accreditation?
Mr. Speaker, I'd answer the gentlewoman that, of course, there are countless ways in which an institution or individual working for that institution in which their religious beliefs may manifest, and certainly that is one of them.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, then I assume the answer to my question was yes, it could.
Are you asking another question?
A question mark. I want clarity on this important bill.
The gentleman yield for an additional question.
I will yield.
The additional question then is, I assume then the answer to the question that I had asked previously was that yes, you could, that an educational institution can make as a condition of admissions to that institution a shared belief that a marriage should only be between a man and a woman, and you could deny admissions and there would be absolutely no penalty allowed as far as accreditation of that institution, scholarships, or grants.
Mr. Speaker, I would answer the gentlewoman, since she didn't appear to understand my answer previously, that of course that is correct. That is the whole point, that religious institutions have these deeply held religious beliefs, that they do mean something to these religious institutions, just as has been contemplated throughout our history, that we respect those beliefs. And yes, indeed, as I used the example on the floor previously, we have tuition assistance grants that go to places like Liberty University. Liberty University is very clear about things like its housing policy, that they do not allow certain circumstances to exist in their housing policy. And so I don't see how I can be any more crystal clear about what this bill is seeking to accomplish, other than trying to protect those institutions and their deeply held beliefs from being penalized by the government for holding them.
I thank the gentleman for the clarity.
The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Simon.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill? Speaking to the bill?
The gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, this is the problem with the bill. The problem with the bill is as the gentleman from Shenandoah just admitted, this is about protecting one specific religious belief. all right? And I understand why you had to do that, and I understand why this bill got narrower. This is sort of a mashup of the bill we had in the House before. We kind of moved it around. We called it, a definition of a penalty, and then said you can't do a penalty instead of saying you can't do all these things. But it's basically the same bill. We just rearranged it and we did it a little bit differently. And we took out the stuff about premarital sex and things like that, so that we really got it down to just one specific religious belief. And the problem with that is a form of establishment, right? We are establishing a state religion. We are saying that we're going to prefer this specific set of beliefs above all others. We're not going to give this same protection to people that believe, for instance, that people of the same sex can marry, right? My rabbi does marriages between same-sex couples. There's no protection for that. Right? There are all kinds of religious beliefs we could choose to protect. But when we say there's one specific religious belief that is so much more important than any other person's religious belief that we're going to give it specific protection, that is a violation of the Establishment Clause. You can't do that. And I don't want to quote the case law here to the body, but that's the real problem with this. And the reason you guys had to narrow this is because, look, nobody's saying that any pastors have to marry anybody they don't want to, right? That's never been the case. There are Catholic priests that won't marry people that are divorced. There are rabbis that won't marry people that are interfaith couples. There are people that won't marry people after sundown on Friday nights. And nobody's ever tried to make those people marry anybody they didn't want to. But you had to narrow this because if you got any broader, you'd find that they're sincerely held religious beliefs that have been used as the basis for all kinds of discrimination in the past. People sincerely believe that people of the different races shouldn't be allowed to marry. So you had to get in here and you had to narrow it. You had to say, well, we don't mean that. We only mean if they believe that marriage is between one man and one woman. That's the specific belief that we're going to try and protect here. And that is unfortunately the flaw with the bill. And that creates an establishment problem, and I would urge the body to please, please, please not pass this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman, Prince William, Mr. Marshall.
Mr. Speaker, addressing the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
I would suggest that the Establishment Clause refers to funding such an institution directly with public money for the support and practice and implementation of those things. Now, as far as I know, there's no money that is going this way. At least that's what Jefferson thought the Establishment Clause and Madison thought the Establishment Clause was. What's very curious here is that opposition to this bill comes from an effort to want to excise out from the public square individuals who accept and practice only what marriage was understood for millennia, and to impose a penalty such as removal of a tax status, or saying that you're ineligible for a grant, or maybe even a school would be ineligible to satisfy the compulsory school attendance laws because they teach that only a man can marry a woman. Now, that's how far this is going to go, and it's very clear that some people who are opposed to this would like to push this to that degree. So, Mr. Speaker, if you want to protect what has been the common understanding for people as different as Napoleon or Socrates or anybody, marriage is between one man and one woman, and to say anything else and punish with the public power of either tax status or licensure or recognition or derecognition in any way, I think is improper, but it's very telling as to how far some people want to go with, quote, the freedom to marry.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 59, noes 38.
Ayes 59, noes 38. The bill is passed.
Senate Bill 767, a bill to amend and reenact section of the Code of Virginia relating to a form of ballot party identification of candidates. The bill is reported to the Committee on Privileges and Elections.
The gentleman from Spotsylvania, Mr. Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, Senate Bill 767 simply expands the current ballot identification that we have at the General Assembly and statewide offices to local offices for persons who are nominated via a political party system, whether it's a primary or a mass meeting or convention. If they were nominated by a political party, it would, Republican or Democrat, it would show an R or a D by their name. If they filed as an independent, it would just indicate that. It only applies to elections that allow people to be nominated by a political party. So it does not affect school board elections. It does not affect cities and towns that have in their charter that their elections are nonpartisan. All those candidates must file as independents. So I would ask that we pass the bill.
The gentleman from Fairfax, Ms. Boysko.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House.
Gentleman rise.
May I speak to the bill, please?
Speaking to the bill. The
Thank
gentleman
you.
has the floor.
Thank you. I actually voted for this bill in committee after we had a good conversation, believing exactly what the gentleman discussed a moment ago. However, following that, I was contacted not only by my own town, but by the Virginia Municipal League, who had significant heartburn over this. They have legitimate concerns about SB 767, saying that the locality's ability to decide for themselves is in jeopardy, whether or not they're going to be partisan elections. They believe, and other lawyers have talked to me, saying that the last bill that passes is the one that has precedence. So this could actually preclude a town or a city from having a nonpartisan election unless it were in their charter. The problem with it is that only 5 towns in Virginia who have populations of 1,000 people or more, Blacksburg, Dumfries, Herndon, Leesburg, and Vienna, have specific provisions in their charter requiring nonpartisan elections. The other 95 towns do not have that in theirs. And as we know, I'm a member of the counties, cities, and towns. We don't always approve charters automatically. It causes some heartburn for them. My locality is in Northern Virginia, where there are a great number of federal employees working, and they are covered under the Hatch Act, specifically preventing them from getting involved in a political office. And that will, as my town believes and the VML believes, could put them in harm of not being able to serve in public office. I believe in this body, we all agree that at the local level, where we're looking at potholes and land use, politics doesn't really belong there. The VML has very strong concerns about this. They do not believe that the towns and the cities are being protected adequately, and therefore I'm going to be voting no against this. I hope the rest of you all will as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman Hopewell, Mr. Ingram.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, many of us here came from local government. Vice mayors, mayors, chairman of boards of supervisors. And I ran as an independent. I always did. I served in the city of Hopewell for almost 6 years. And I do not think that partisan politics should be at the local level. And I think that this bill would just create more problems. And I agree with what the lady says. And thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman Henrico, Mr. O'Bannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speak to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
I was on a subcommittee that heard this bill, and I will tell you that to my satisfaction, I think the Hatch Act issues were addressed. We talk a lot about transparency down here. All this bill does is say that if you participate in a political process that's organized, either a mass meeting, a convention, or a primary, where it's permitted in Virginia, then your name will have the DRR on the ballot. I think it's real simple, and I hope we'll support the bill.
Gentleman from Augusta, Mr. Landis.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, let me just emphasize one thing that the chairman of the Privileges and Elections Committee said, and that is that this bill only affects the offices for which the Commonwealth already allows candidates to be nominated by a partisan process. I understand the concerns related to local governments, but it only allows where there is an office that's had a process where someone has been nominated by either party. It doesn't affect independents. It doesn't affect those candidates that run by other parties, by other processes. It only affects the partisan nomination process in those offices. So I hope the House will support the bill.
Gentleman staffer, Mr. Dudenheffer.
Mr. Speaker, speak to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, members of the body, I'd like to just correct a statement that was made concerning Hatch Act and violations or the precluding thereof of federal employees from running for local government. It absolutely does not preclude federal employees from local government. It just precludes them from being a party nominee. In Stafford County, for many, many years, we've had a federal employee work for the Corps of Engineers who ran as an independent continuously and served honorably throughout that time. And then my last comment is that anyone who thinks that by not putting a D or an R or whatever behind the name stops it from being partisan is not listening to the real world. Thank you.
The gentleman from Powhatan, Mr. Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a motion.
It'll be stated.
Mr. Speaker, my motion is that we move the pending question.
The gentleman from Powhatan, Mr. Ware, moves the pending question. As many, House will come to order. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. As opposed, no. The motion, whatever it was, is agreed to. Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 46, noes 52.
Ayes 46, noes 52. The bill fails to pass.
Continuing with today's calendar, turning to page 4 of the printed version, Senate Bill 750, a bill to amend and reenact several sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Commonwealth's Development Opportunity Fund, political contributions, reporting. The bill was reported to the Committee for Courts of Justice with a substitute. Mr. Speaker, there are floor amendments drawn to the substitute.
The gentleman from Shenandoah, Mr. Gilbert.
Mr. Speaker, I move the committee substitute.
Questions on adoption of the committee substitute. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Substitute's agreed to. The gentleman from Shenandoah.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, previously, I guess in last year's ethics bill, we put some limitations on what the governor's PAC could do. There was a prohibition on contributions, gifts, or other items of a value greater than $100 to the governor or his campaign committee. We were approached, or I guess the senator was approached by the VEDP, Mr. Speaker, and with concerns about why this was negatively impacting our ability to do economic development in the Commonwealth because of some unforeseen consequences. I think the example we kept hearing about was that there may be some employee somewhere or some other entity in some other state that's affiliated with somebody trying to do business here in the Commonwealth through the Governor's Opportunity Fund, and somehow we may be catching up people in this that may not have been who may not know the consequences. The campaign committees may not know that these other people exist, and so it was just unmanageable, and this is one of the many things we said might be unworkable. So, Mr. Speaker, what this Senate bill does is effectively replace the prohibition with some measure, significant measure, I would say, with the floor amendment of transparency. It provides that on a quarterly basis, VEDP shall notify the governor of awards made from the fund in the prior quarter. And then, Mr. Speaker, the floor amendment, which I will ask the clerk to report, takes what was originally a request from VEDP for the governor or his campaign committees to provide certain information. It makes that the governor and his campaign committees shall provide this information. I think that rectifies the concerns that were brought to me about making sure that there's actual transparency that we can enforce. And so that's what the bill does, Mr. Speaker, and I would ask the clerk to report the floor amendment, please.
Floor amendment offered by Delegate Gilbert to the committee substitute. Two floor amendments. Amendment number 1 on line 210. Line 210, after the word quarter, strike the remainder of line 210 through the word committee. 2 on line 211, and insert the following. Within 18 months of the date of each award from the fund, the governor, his campaign committee, and his political action committee shall. Amendment number 2 on line 212. Amendment 2, line 212, after section 30-355, strike the remainder of line 212 all the way through the word fund on line 213.
The question is on adoption of the floor amendments offered by the gentleman from Shenandoah, Mr. Gilbert. As many as favor adoption of the floor amendments will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Floor amendments agreed to. Shall the gentleman from Alexandria, Mr. Levine.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman from Shenandoah yield for a question?
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask the gentleman whether or not it's true that under current law it would be prohibited for a grantee of the fund to give a $100,000 donation to the governor while the governor was deciding whether or not to approve that donation. Is that true that under current law that's prohibited?
Mr. Speaker, I believe that the prohibitions relate to the period in which the award is being considered and the, I think, some time period thereafter.
And I have a follow-up question, Mr. Speaker, if the gentleman would yield.
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
My question for the patron, Mr. Speaker, for the gentleman from Shenandoah, is whether under this current bill that would change the law, and even though it would be disclosed, would allow someone who wanted to influence a very bad governor, not at all the current governor, but someone who wanted to influence a very bad governor to give a donation of $100,000 while the negotiations are pending or right after the award is given. And even though it would be disclosed, that would then be legal under this bill. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I think that's absolutely right. And the considerations here, you know, when we passed that bill last year, that was certainly our intent, was to prohibit the very stark, clear examples of undue influence that may exist. The problem is that we created a number of unintended consequences that were not foreseen, that weren't as clear and weren't as readily apparent. And so VEDP was very concerned about the unintended consequences, and they can certainly articulate the many examples that they came up with much better than I can. But it was not to prevent the kind of example that the gentleman's using. It's to rectify any number of other unintended consequences that have arisen since then. So instead of prohibiting it, it puts it all out there for the world to see on a regular basis, so that any undue influence, that there will be consequences to be had for that politically for whomever is willing to engage in that sort of consideration.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
I understand what this bill is trying to do. I am fully supportive of getting rid of all the unintended consequences. I still think there's a loophole in the bill. I'm going to vote against it, but I do think this bill can be fixed so that we don't have the unintended consequences, but we still prohibit what would clearly, to me, be a conflict. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman, Shenandoah, Mr.
Speaking
Gilbert.
to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with the gentleman, and if there were a perfect way to do these things that someone could easily come up with, we would certainly adopt the easy path every time we can. But it is very difficult to write legislation that covers every possibility, that also doesn't capture a whole bunch of activity that we didn't intend to. And this was the problem that when we were first going through the ethics legislation, talking about, it was constantly reporters or citizens would ask me, why don't you just say no gifts? Because it sounds so simple. Well, I would say, if I drive an hour to go give a speaking engagement and someone at the speaking engagement offers me a bottle of water so I can clear my throat before I give my speech that I just drove an hour for, am I able to accept that bottle of water, or is that not allowed under your no gifts theory? And universally, everyone thinks that is perfectly reasonable, that I could accept a bottle of water to clear my throat before I give a speech. And if we start doing that, then we're starting to do the very balancing test that we tried to achieve in the court's ethics subcommittee when we were working through this for hours on end. So that was one example of how hard it is to get this right and to try to prevent the exact types of things that the gentleman is talking about without getting into things that we didn't intend. And so I'm happy to work with the gentleman. If he has a magic answer on how he can get with the folks at VEDP and see how we can maybe fix those unintended consequences, I'll be happy to join him in that effort. Thank you.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 93, no 6.
Ayes 93, no 6. The bill is passed.
Continuing with today's calendar, next category of bills, House bills with Senate amendments. House bills with Senate amendments. House Bill 773, a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to the Government Non-Discrimination Act creation. The bill passed the House originally February 16th, passed the Senate with a substitute on February 25th.
The gentleman from Shenandoah, Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would ask as a parliamentary inquiry whether the Senate substitute before us is germane to the bill.
Okay, let's take a look at it.
Yeah, right. Luke, give him one of these. Marcus, did you get him? Okay, good. Your joke.
This bill specifically dealt with discriminatory actions that adversely affect the tax treatment of persons that withheld otherwise, or that withheld or otherwise made unavailable any grants or contracts or loans. We talked about that earlier today. Both the original bill as introduced and as passed by the House broadly defined the word person to include not only individuals, but corporations, associations, partnerships, and organizations. However, the Senate substitute changes the fundamental purpose of the bill and speaks only of the solemnization of marriage by certain individuals and the actions of individuals employed by a religious organization in the scope of their employment. And accordingly, I would rule that the substitute is not germane.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
No, state it.
What then would be the posture of the underlying legislation?
Yeah. We'll just communicate it back to the Senate, see what they do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Clerk will continue with the calendar.
Continuing with the calendar, House Bill 883, a bill to amend and reenact section of the code relating to comprehensive plan. Bill passed the House originally February 16th, passed Senate with an amendment on March 7th.
The gentleman from Salem, Mr. Habib.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 883 passed this body unanimously. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to accept the amendment from the Senate, but some of you are going to want to vote against that. So let me tell you what the bill does, what the amendment is, and then why you'd be for it or against it. The only thing the bill did as introduced was a statewide policy allowing by right zoning for telecommunication towers in certain public utility facilities. If you want to ask me a question about that, we can waste all morning talking about it, but that's what it did. Before it got to the House, Fairfax County, I think on behalf of all of Planning District 8, asked to be excluded from the bill. And as we saw it, they were excluded, so nobody opposed the bill. In the Senate unanimously put Planning District 8 back into the bill and again made it a statewide bill. I talked to as many people from Planning District 8 as I could. About half of you wanted the amendment, about half of you didn't want the amendment. I think the statewide policy exhibited by adopting the amendment is better. So, Mr. Speaker, I would ask that the body accept the amendment. But if you've heard from Fairfax County, Prince William, Loudoun, your local governments, you have concerns about their ordinances, you may want to vote against the amendment. But I'd ask that we adopt the amendment.
Speaking to the motion.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, I contacted the lobbyist or government representative who's a former supervisor for Prince William County. And it was his judgment that this would allow the kind of the indiscriminate placement without a hearing of cell towers. And if you want that on one of your brochures, like the gentleman from Fairfax always talks about, then just vote to accept the amendment. If you don't want this and you don't want people complaining about this, then I would urge a no vote on the amendment. Thank you.
Ms.
Councilman
Speaker.
Salem?
Yes, sir. Just very briefly speaking of the bill. What the bill does is gives local governments the authority to adopt by right zoning in certain designated zoning localities. So, for example, Fairfax already has by right zoning in industrial areas. It does not allow unfettered placement of telecommunications towers or public utility facilities throughout the county. It simply gives the locality the ability to adopt by right ordinances. The reason Fairfax has a problem with this is they already have a by right ordinance in very narrow circumstances, but they're requiring hearings, and so this might take away that hearing they currently require. As I understand it, that's in something like 0.1% of Fairfax where they have this designation. So again, yes, it makes cell phone towers and public utility facilities a little easier if the localities adopt those ordinances. It doesn't force that on the localities.
The questions on adoption of the committee amendment. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Senate amendment. Oh, okay, yeah, I'll take it back. Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 71, noes 27.
Ayes 71, noes 27. The Senate amendment is agreed to.
Turning to page 5 of the printed calendar, House Bill 451, a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to the Commission on Economic Opportunity for Virginians in Aspiring and Diverse Communities. Report, the bill passed the House February 16th, passed the Senate with amendments on March 8th.
The gentleman from Virginia Beach. Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir, Mr. Speaker. This bill went through Senate rules with some friendly amendments. Our friends in the Senate would like to have a little bit more representation on this committee, so it has gone from 4 members in the House and 2 members in the Senate to 4 members in the House and 3 members in the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House accept the Senate amendments.
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 96, noes 3.
Ayes 96, noes 3. The Senate amendment is agreed to.
House Bill 525, a bill to require the Standards of Learning Innovation Committee to review and make recommendations to the chairman of the House Committee on Education and the Senate Committee on Education and Health on standardized testing in public high schools in the Commonwealth. Bill passed the House February 8th, passed the Senate with a substitute on March 8th.
The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Lemunion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, the original bill dealt with recommendations from the SOL Innovation Committee related to SOL tests in high school. The Senate amendment makes clear that it should be the State Board of Education that receives those recommendations, and that actually was an oversight in the original bill, so I hope it'd be the pleasure of the body to accept the Senate substitute.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 98, noes 0.
Ayes 98, noes 0. The Senate substitute is agreed to.
House Bill 665, a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to the creation of the Commission on Employee Retirement, Security, and Pension Reform. Bill passed the House February 16th, passed the Senate with amendments on March 8th.
The gentleman from Suffolk, Mr. Jones.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, this simply will change from 2 to 3 the membership of the Senate. And this is the Speaker's bill, as we know, and I would ask that we'd accept the Senate amendments.
Shall the Senate amendments be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 99, noes 0.
Ayes 99, noes 0. The Senate amendments are agreed to.
Turning to page 6 of today's printed calendar, continuing House bills with Senate amendments. House Bill 846, a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to the Virginia Collaborative Economic Development Act. The bill passed the House February 9th, subsequently passed the Senate with a substitute on March 8th.
The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Hugo.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 846 is the second part of the Go Virginia bill that the gentleman from Portsmouth and I, Delegate James, and others have been working on. I would ask the Senate amendments change it, put some somewhat dramatic changes on it. I would ask that we reject the Senate substitute.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 1, noes 98.
Ayes 1, noes 98. The Senate amendments are rejected.
House Bill 1069, a bill to amend and reenact various sections of the Code of Virginia and repeal others, all relating to limitations on tolling, toll collection fees and penalties, period of non-payment, notice of non-payment. The bill passed the House February 16th, passed Senate with a substitute with amendment on March 8th.
The gentleman from Suffolk, Mr. Jones.
Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, this bill, when it left the House, had the policy dealing with limitations on tolling in the Commonwealth. Also has some consumer protection measures in there about notification, changing the level of the fines and fees, and notification as far as when you could proceed with an unpaid toll. What the Senate Committee on Transportation did, and the Senate when they sent the substitute back, is they took all of the reference and all the public policy dealing with limitations on tolling out. So what's left in this bill is a notification to consumer notification items, limitation of tolling. I would ask that we would accept the Senate substitute.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 89, noes 10.
Ayes 89, noes 10. The Senate substitute and amendment are agreed to.
Turning to page 7 of the printed calendar, House Bill 1343, a bill to amend and reenact various sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the creation of the Virginia Growth and Opportunity Board, awarding of grants for certain research and development, technology, and economic development projects. The bill passed the House February 16th, passed the Senate with a substitute on March 8th.
Gentleman from Suffolk, Mr. Jones.
Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, had this bill been up yesterday, I would have asked you to have accepted the Senate's actions, but we've been notified by VRS there's a technical amendment that is necessary. So we'll need to reject the Senate amendments and put this in conference so we can get that technical issue ironed out.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 0, noes 99.
Ayes 0, noes 99. The Senate substitute is rejected.
House Bill 1362, a bill to amend and reenact a variety of sections of the Code of Virginia, all relating to lobbyist reporting, the State and Local Government Conflict of Interest Act, and the General Assembly Conflicts of Interest Act, annual filing of required disclosures, separate report of gifts. The bill passed the House February 16th, passed Senate with a substitute on March 8th.
The gentleman from Suffolk, the gentleman from Shenandoah, Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Senate adopted, I think, all of the concepts that they had in their bill that we rejected when we conformed it to my bill. Obviously, that's what happens when you have competing concepts. So I would ask at this point that we reject the Senate amendments and put the bill into conference.
Shall the Senate amendments be agreed to?
I said like 10 times.
The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 0, noes 98.
Ayes 0, noes 98. The Senate amendments are rejected.
Continuing with today's calendar, page 7 of the printed version. Next category of bills are House joint resolutions with Senate amendments.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Charlottesville, Mr. Toscano.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, having voted on the prevailing side by which we passed on page 6, HB 1069, I move that we reconsider that vote so that we can have a do-over.
The gentleman from Charlottesville, Mr. Toscano, moves that having voted on the prevailing side by which we agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 1069, we reconsider that vote. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is agreed to. Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 85, noes 14.
Ayes 85, noes 14. The Senate substitute is agreed to.
Returning to page 7, next category of bills, House Joint Resolution with Senate Amendments, House Joint Resolution 177, expressing the sense of the General Assembly and condemning the anti-Israel boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement and its activities in Virginia, as its agenda is inherently antithetical and deeply damaging to the cause of peace, justice, equality, democracy, and human rights for all peoples in the Middle East. Agreed to by the House February 2nd, agreed to by the Senate with a substitute yesterday.
The gentleman from Virginia Beach, Mr. Mayares.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. There were some minor changes. There was an amendment in the nature of a substitute that I worked with the Senate Rules Chairman on. The only additions were recognizing Israel's birthday and the 60th anniversary, and they had requested some additional language to fit into what their expectations were, which was this resolution be communicated to the Virginia's Israel Advisory Board. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House accept the Senate substitute.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 85, noes 5.
Ayes 85, noes 5. The Senate substitute is agreed to.
Turning to page 8, printed calendar, sorry. House Joint Resolution 332, commending Capitol Square. The resolution was agreed to by the House on February 6th, agreed to by the Senate with a substitute on March 8th.
The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hope it will be the pleasure of the House to adopt the Senate substitute. This is on Capitol Square. It does some very minor things. Rather than commending Capitol Square, the Senate substitute celebrates the 200th anniversary of Capitol Square, and they make sure the resolution is also goes to the Capitol Foundation. So with that, I hope it will be the pleasure of the House to accept the Senate substitute.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 99, no 0.
Ayes 99, no 0. The Senate substitute is agreed to.
Mr. Speaker, over here.
Yeah, gentleman from Loudon, Mr. Greason.
Mr. Speaker, I apologize. I have a parliamentary inquiry. I was going to come down and ask the clerk in private, but we are voting too quickly. If I was to reconsider a bill, having voted on the prevailing side, and then take it by temporarily, how much time could I buy myself to work on it? And what I mean by that is I don't want to take it by for the day because I'm not trying to kill it by putting it in conference. So I'm trying to figure out how much time I might have to work on it without doing any undue harm to the patron's bill.
Yeah, you can take it by for the day because we have another day before you can put it in conference.
Okay, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I might make a motion?
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, having voted on the prevailing side by which we passed House Bill 525 on page 5 of the calendar, I might ask that we reconsider that vote and then take the bill by for the day.
The gentleman from Loudon, Mr. Greason, moves that having voted on the prevailing side by which we passed House Bill, or accepted the Senate substitute to House Bill 525, we reconsider that vote. Gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Lemunion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, speaking to the motion.
Sure.
I hope it would be the pleasure of the body to reject the motion to reconsider. There's nothing wrong with this bill. The bill in its original form and in the form that we just passed it says that the SOL Innovation Committee needs to make recommendations about high school SOLs. The only change here is that the information goes to the State Board of Education as it should. It also is a public document. We will all see it. There's nothing to be afraid of in this bill, and there's no need to send it into conference. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the motion. Mr. Speaker, I really am just trying to do the right thing here and make sure we understand it. I'd ask for the courtesy to just go by for the day. If the bill is written properly, there is no damage to going by for the day. I specifically asked if it would kill it by taking it by and putting it in conference. I'd ask for that courtesy and let it go by for the day.
The question is on the gentleman from Loudon's motion to reconsider the vote by which we accepted the Senate substitute to House Bill 525. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. That motion is agreed to. Without objection, House Bill 525 by for the day.
Continuing.
The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House stand in recess until 12:15.
Gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox, moves the House stand in recess until 12:15. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is agreed to.
The House Republican Caucus will meet immediately upon the recess in House Room 1.
The House stands in recess until 12:15. House will come to order. Members, please take your seats. The House will be at ease. The House will come to order. The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Speaker, I move that H.R. 424, which is the joint order for election of the Supreme Court, be postponed until the conclusion of the Thursday, March the 10th House calendar. And if I could speak to that motion.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, this will also have the effect of elevating, obviously, the special order, which has the other judges, which I think our intent is to do when all the paperwork is in order.
Thank you. The question is, shall the House postpone House Joint Resolution 424, joint order for the election of the Supreme Court, until the conclusion of Thursday, March 10th House calendar? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion is agreed to. House will be at ease. The House will come to order. The clerk will report House Joint Resolution 536.
House Joint Resolution 536, election of circuit court judges, general district court judges, juvenile and domestic relations district court judges, and a member of the Judicial Inquiry and Review Commission.
Gentleman, Richmond City, Mr. Lapasi.
Mr. Speaker, I move the adoption of the resolution.
Shall the resolution be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 93, no 0.
Ayes 93, no 0. Resolution is agreed to. The gentleman from Richmond City, Mr. Lupasi, will communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
Wow.
House will be at ease. House will come to order. House will be at ease. House will come to order this time. Sergeant Arms.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the Senate.
Gentleman from Rockingham, Senator Obenshain.
Mr. Speaker, I've been directed by the President of the Senate to inform the House delegates that the Senate has agreed to House Joint Resolution 536.
Thank you.
Thank you. We were informed.
The time for the joint order has arrived, and the House on its part is ready to proceed with the execution of House Joint Resolution 536. Nominations are now in order for judges of the Judicial Circuit. The clerk will report a resolution.
House Resolution 221, nominating persons to be elected to circuit court judgeships.
Are there further nominations? Chair hears none. As many as favor adoption of the resolution will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The resolution is agreed to. Nominations are now in order for judges of the general district courts. The clerk will report a resolution.
House Resolution 222, nominating persons to be elected to general district court judgeships.
Are there further nominations? Chair hears none. As many as favor adoption of the resolution will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The resolution is agreed to. Nominations now in order for judges of the juvenile domestic relations district courts. The clerk will report a resolution.
House Resolution 223, nominating persons to be elected to juvenile and domestic relations district court judgeships.
Are there further nominations? The chair hears none. As many as favor the adoption of the resolution will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The resolution is agreed to. Nominations are now in order for a member of the Judicial Inquiry and Review Commission. The clerk will report a resolution.
House Resolution number 224, nominating a person to be elected a member of the Judicial Inquiry and Review Commission.
Are there further nominations? Chair hears none. As many as favor adoption of the resolution will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The resolution is agreed to. Gentleman from Richmond City, Mr. Lupasi, will inform the Senate of the nominations made by the House, and the House will be at ease.
Yes, sir.
Order. Sergeant Arms.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the Senate.
The gentleman from Rockingham.
Mr. Speaker, I've been directed by the President of the Senate to inform the House delegates that in execution of the joint order pursuant to House Joint Resolution 536, nominations have been made by the Senate for certain judicial offices as listed in the attached papers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The block voting for judges and other judicial officers will now commence. It's about to commence. Those in favor of the nominees for judges of the circuit courts, as noted in House Resolution 221 for terms of 8 years, commencing on the date specified, will vote yes. Clerk will close the roll. Those in favor of the nominees for judges of the general district courts, as noted in House Resolution 222 for terms of 6 years, commencing on the date specified, will vote yes. Clerk will close the roll. Those in favor, those in favor of the nominees for judges of the juvenile and domestic relations district courts, as noted in House Resolution 223 for terms of 6 years, commencing on the date specified, will vote yes. Clerk will close the roll. Those in favor of the nominee for a member of the Judicial Inquiry and Review Commission, as noted in House Resolution 224 for a term of 4 years, commencing on the date specified, will vote yes. Clerk will close the roll. Clerk will make an announcement.
Speaker appoints Delegates Albo, Lupasi, and Watts, the committee on the part of the House, to count and report the vote of each House in each case.
The House will be at ease. House will come to order. Joint order under House Joint Resolution number 536 will be resumed. The gentleman from Richmond City, Mr. Lupasi.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to report that the committee to count the vote of each House met and the nominees fulfilled criteria for election, and I move the reading of the report be waived.
The question is, shall the reading of the report be waived? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 88, no 0.
Ayes 88, no 0. The reading of the report is waived. Those judges previously nominated, having received a majority of the votes cast by the members elected to each house, are declared duly elected judges of the Circuit Court of the appropriate judicial circuit for terms of 8 years commencing on the date specified. Those judges previously nominated, having received a majority of the votes cast by the members elected to each house, are declared duly elected as judges of the General District Court of the appropriate judicial district for the terms of 6 years commencing on the date specified. Those judges previously nominated, having received a majority of the votes cast by the members elected to each house, are declared duly elected as judges of the Juvenile and Domestic Relations District Court of the appropriate judicial district for terms of 6 years commencing on the date specified. And the member previously nominated, having received a majority of the votes cast by the joint vote of the two houses of the General Assembly, is declared duly elected as a member of the Judicial Inquiry and Review Commission for a term of 4 years commencing on the date specified. And that ends Joint Order, House Joint Resolution 536.
Mr. Speaker, that completes today's legislative business.
Does the clerk have any announcements or communications?
Yes, sir, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the House, the Speaker appoints the following members to various bills going into conference. For House Bill 25, on behalf of the House, the Speaker appoints delegates Habib, Collins, and Mason. For House Bill 25, the Speaker appoints, on behalf of the House conferees, delegates Habib, Collins, and Mason. For House Bill 168, Speaker appoints conferees, delegates LaRock, Albo, and Toscano. For House Bill 168, Speaker appoints delegates LaRock, Albo, and Toscano. For House Bill 373, the Speaker appoints delegates Yancey, Bell of Albemarle, and Watts. For House Bill 373, Speaker appoints delegates Yancey, Bell of Albemarle, and Watts. For House Bill 568, the Speaker appoints delegates Cox, Greason, and Torian. For House Bill 568, on behalf of the House, the Speaker appoints delegates Cox, Greason, and Torian. For House Bill 622, the Speaker appoints delegates Bell of Albemarle, Albo, and Herring. For House Bill 622, the Speaker appoints delegates Bell of Albemarle, Albo, and Herring. For House Bill 842, the Speaker appoints part of the House conferees, delegates Klein, Dudenhoeffer, and Bulova. For House Bill 842, delegates Klein, Dudenhoeffer, and Bulova. For House Bill 858, the Speaker appoints part of the House conferees, delegates Landis, Jones, and James. For House Bill 858, the Speaker appoints delegates Landis, Jones, and James. For House Bill 879, the Speaker appoints part of the House delegates Hugo, Albo, and Keem. House conferees for House Bill 879, delegates Hugo, Albo, and Keem. For House Bill 1228, the Speaker appoints delegates Miller, Helsel, and McQuinn. For House Bill 1228, House conferees, delegates Miller, Helsel, and McQuinn. And for House Bill 1255, the Speaker appoints delegates Pillion, Kilgore, and Mason. HB 1255, delegates Pillion, Kilgore, and Mason. Mr. Speaker, also would advise the body, House conference information is available in the back of the calendar of conference bills in committee or those which are unfinished business of bills moving that way. So to the extent that you want to work on your conference reports, they actually have to be in conference to begin that process. So bear that in mind. I just sent everyone an email which hopefully re-explains that or reminds folks of that. Looking ahead to tomorrow, presumably the rural caucus meeting at 4 is not taking place today. Accordingly, looking ahead to tomorrow, March 10th, first caucus meeting will be the Hampton Roads Caucus. They're meeting at 8 a.m. in the 6th floor Speaker's Conference Room. The Committee on Rules, House Rules Committee, will meet 5 minutes prior to the beginning of the Republican and Democratic caucuses tomorrow morning in House Room 1. It's a new meeting for House Rules. They have one Senate joint resolution confirming appointments. The Democratic caucus will meet at 9:15 in House Room 2. The Republican caucus 9:15 in House Room 1. That means the House Rules Committee will be at 9:10 tomorrow morning. Speaker, that completes the announcements that I have.
The gentleman from Suffolk, Mr. Jones.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, announcement.
Sure.
Tomorrow, hopefully at 1:30, we'll have a full briefing on the conference report. It should be here at the Capitol. Tentatively, we're scheduled for 1:30 tomorrow for the Appropriations Committee to brief the body.
The gentleman from Colonial Heights, the gentlewoman from Sussex, Ms. Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for announcement.
The gentlewoman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that everybody enjoyed those wonderful desserts they had this afternoon. And I would just like the body just to give thanks to Delegate McQuinn for all her hard work.
Thank you. Gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Speaker, an announcement first. Delegate Jones just wanted to remind everybody in the next hour, the budget should be online, hour and a half, so you can look for that. And with that, Mr. Speaker, motion. Mr. Speaker, I move that when the House adjourned today, adjourn to reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox moves that when the House adjourned today, adjourn to reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m. As many as favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is agreed to. The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House to now adjourn.
Gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox moves the House to now adjourn. As many as favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is agreed to. The House stands adjourned until tomorrow at 10 a.m. House will come to order. Clerk will continue the calendar.
Continuing with the calendar, page 19, House bills and joint resolutions in conference. A conference report has been received on page 20 of today's printed calendar. Page 20, a conference report was received for House Bill 681. House Bill 681 is a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to trafficking and persons civil action. The conference report has been available online as before the body.
The gentleman from Chesapeake, Mr. Leftwich.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the body, as indicated by the clerk, this is the bill that creates a civil action for human trafficking. The Senate has agreed to the House version of the bill, and I would ask that you accept the conference report.
Shall the conference report be adopted? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 93, no 0.
Ayes 93, no 0. The conference report is adopted.
Mr. Speaker, having no further conference reports submitted to the front desk, that completes the calendar.
The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the special continuing order pursuant to Rule 19 of HAR 37 be suspended at the conclusion of HAR 422, which was a joint order for election of a Supreme Court Justice. And I'd like to speak to that.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, it's my understanding that where we are right now with the special continuing order is going to take us about 2 o'clock to be ready with that. And as the minority leader said, we suspended it, we need to conclude, do the tally, et cetera. So what this allows us to do is to do that process and then I think put us in the proper posture.
Gentleman from Charlottesville, Mr. Descano.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield for question?
Will the gentleman yield? Gentleman yields.
Mr. Speaker, I'd ask the gentleman, just so I understand, do I understand it correctly that when 245 rolls around, this old order will expire and that we will need a new order?
I would say to the gentleman, I think it's 242, but clerk can confirm that. But I think if he reads the last line of the resolution, which I was saying yesterday, the joint order may be suspended by the presiding officer of each house at any time, but for no longer than 24 hours to receive the report of the joint subcommittee. So I would say to the gentleman that the report of the subcommittee has to be received by that time, is my understanding.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
The gentleman yield.
So maybe I didn't phrase the question correctly, but I would like to know, is it the gentleman's view that at 2:42, that order will be suspended and that we will need a new order to proceed for the election of a Supreme Court justice?
It is my view that if the process continues and the report of the joint committee is received, that no, at that point, I think you've fulfilled this last line. And then if you look back, it says on line 6, resolved by the House of Delegates, Senate concurring, the General Assembly shall proceed, blah, blah, to the election of Supreme Court justice for the term of 12 years, but on or after Thursday, March 3rd, 2016. So I think that, Mr. Speaker, would be the proper interpretation.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield for a question?
I yield.
Will the gentleman yield? Gentleman yield.
So am I understanding all of that verbiage to say that if there is a report made under this order, there will not be a need for a new order?
That is my interpretation, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, one final question.
Gentleman yield.
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
So assuming that set of facts, then it would be the impression of the gentleman that we would proceed under the order that presently exists, and that is 484, I think, right?
I would say then you would have several options. You could, under 424, if the report has been received, then I would think you could then, obviously, there could be another nomination made under that particular joint resolution. Not saying that's going to happen, but I think that would be that would not preclude that from happening.
I thank the gentleman.
Shall the motion be agreed to? Those in favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is agreed to. House will be at ease. The House will be at ease.
Yes, sir.
House will come to order. The joint order under House Joint Resolution 424 is now resumed. The clerk will announce the committee to canvass the vote.
Speaker appoints delegates Albo, Lupasi, and Watts to committee on the part of the House to count and report the vote of each House.
The House will be at ease. House will come to order.
Just do it during the recess. And distribute them then? Yeah. Okay. Unless we hear otherwise.
The clerk will read the report of the committee.
For a Justice of the Supreme Court of Virginia for a term of 12 years commencing March 3rd, 2016, Rossi D. Alston Jr. received in the House of Delegates 66 votes, in the Senate 20 votes.
The Honorable Rossi D. Alston Jr., previously nominated, having failed to receive a majority of the votes cast by the members elected of each House, is not elected. The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House stand in recess until 3:15.
The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox, moves the House stand in recess until 3:15. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is agreed to.
Immediately upon recess, the House Republican Caucus will meet in House Room 1. And immediately upon conclusion of the House Republican Caucus, the House Courts of Justice Committee will meet in House Room 1.
Mr. Speaker,
The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Albo.
maybe better to set a specific time in case the public wants to come. So would you suggest 2:30? Okay, 2:30 then, Mr. Clerk. You said 3? I didn't know.
Why don't you
Is
say
it
3?
30 for 3 or what?
That's 1, 2, 3.
Okay. I'll remember that when counting the votes next time.
House Republican Caucus will meet immediately upon the recess in House Room 1 at 3 o'clock today in House Room 1. The House Courts of Justice Committee will be meeting. 3 o'clock, you said.
House stands in recess until 3:15.